And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers destroy the Chattanooga Mocs 99-71 in their first round game in the NCAA tournament. It is a game where the Hoosiers came out with great energy early, but not always great focus and execution. And it was a bit back and forth. The Hoosiers went on a nice run there at the end of the first half. But Chattanooga made a three at the end. It's a 9-point game. We'd have to see what the Hoosiers would have at the start of the second half. And Indiana came out and they combined great focus, great execution with their energy and absolutely rolled in the second half. And for anybody who can remember back to the 2002 run that the Hoosiers made as a 5 seed, this game was a lot like the Kent State game that Indiana won in the Elite Eight to go to the Final Four. And that game, Indiana shot some ridiculous percentage from the field, 60-some percent. Tonight, the Hoosiers were 64.9% from the field, 58% from downtown. Absolutely rolled, and the Hoosiers get a first-round victory and now await the winner of Kentucky Stony Brook, which will begin here in about a half hour. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am your host, Jared Morris. Ryan Phillips is here. We hope that Andy Bottoms will get here. We had a few technical issues at the beginning, so we're still trying to get him in here. But either way, Ryan and I have you covered, even if it's just us. And let's begin tonight's show, as we always do, with tonight's banner moment. And look, on a night like tonight, there are so many different places that we can go, and that's why I want to make sure that we don't overlook the obvious place where we have to go, and that is Yogi Ferrell. It was Yogi's first ever 20-point, 10-assist game. And the irony here is that on a night when Indiana's shooting was such a big part of what they did, Yogi actually had the worst field goal percentage on the team. He was only 6 of 13 from downtown, and that was actually a big drag on Indiana's field goal percentage. But Yogi played terrific, and there's 2 reasons why I'm giving him the banner moment. Number one is early in the game, I thought Yogi and Troy both were trying to do a little bit too much. And you'll remember Yogi had a couple of bad turnovers. One where he threw the ball over his head backwards and it got stolen. Another one where he's just trying to do too much. And I thought that was a big reason why Indiana's offense was a bit up and down, because Yogi and Troy were a bit up and down. But Yogi especially really dialed it back and started making better, smarter plays. Didn't turn the ball over again, and I thought that was a big reason. And the other one is, think back to the beginning of the second half, because it was 46-37 at halftime. Chattanooga had made that 3. And whenever that happens, you kind of wonder if a team is going to get a little momentum from it. Well, Chattanooga comes out on the first possession of the second half. They go right down and score a bucket. So they're on a little mini 5-0 run. It's a 7-point game. You can see they're starting to believe on a day when 2 12s have already beaten 15 seeds. And Chattanooga goes to a 1-3-1 zone, try and switch it up on the Hoosiers. The next possession, Yogi drains a 3. And it was like with that shot, Indiana was off and running, because they would score 7 quick points. The lead would never get any closer. And it was just a huge moment, a huge dagger from a senior leader stepping up and saying, I got this. And it came on the heels of Yogi calling everybody over at halftime, calling a team huddle. And this is Justin Albers who reported this and tweeted about it, said that Yogi looked very determined and demonstrative. And that's the kind of leadership you want to see from your senior, but not just the vocal leadership, then going out and playing and doing something about it and backing it up with action on the floor. And so on a night when OG was great and the return of Robert Johnson was great, to me, Yogi is the banner moment, because with a senior point guard playing like he is and playing like he did tonight, the sky's the limit for this Indiana team. Hat tip to you, Yogi. Great night. And with that, let's go over to Ryan and get his opening rant on tonight's IU victory.
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed with the way Indiana played. I was impressed with the returning guys, with Robert Johnson. Colin Hartman wasn't really returning, but he was banged up clearly, had a wrist injury, and it showed a few times when he shot longer jump shots. But I thought Robert Johnson, Juwan Morgan had his struggles defensively, but certainly didn't really hurt Indiana repeatedly. I didn't think he had a great game defensively, but again, the fact that those guys can all be in the game and contribute despite injuries, I mean, it was just a really good all-around game from guys. Max Bielfeldt had a real nice game with 10.7 rebounds. It was, I guess what I'm getting at is that it was just balance. It was this whole team contributing, which has been, when the Hoosiers have been successful this year, it's everybody contributing. OG Anunoby 14, Troy Williams 12, and I thought Troy didn't do a lot tonight. I thought that he disappeared at times during the game, except on the glass. He was skying for rebounds the entire game. 12 points, added 8 rebounds. Nick Zeisloft nailed 3 threes. I loved when he ball faked and drove in, and Bill Rafter, he said, "No, don't shoot a 2. You've got a reputation to uphold," or something like that. Thought that was great. But yeah, Robert Johnson, 7 points, dished out 6 assists. I mean, so this was everybody contributing. And just for fun, Yogi Ferrell was plus 46 on the night. I don't know if I've ever seen that high. Max Bielfeldt was plus 36, and I think that's the highest I've ever seen. So plus 46 tonight for Yogi Ferrell. Clearly, as you said, he's the engine that gets this thing going. And yeah, just great job by the Hoosiers, because that was a good team they faced. I mean, don't let the final score fool you. That is a good team. So, well, actually, that 46 number might be off, because the box score I'm looking at is a little messed up.
The stats are all jacked up from this
They
game.
are jacked up, yeah.
Any of the numbers.
So I'm sorry, but still, he was plus a lot. We'll just go there. And so I thought Indiana played very well. That's a very good team they beat, a dangerous team that certainly could have taken out another 5 seed. Indiana didn't let that happen. I showed up, and now I know they're looking forward to a potential matchup with those blue guys on Saturday.
Hey, you know what the best part was about that stat is everybody would have believed you if Yogi was plus 36.
Totally.
So
I have no idea. Yeah, I would have been like, oh, yeah, it makes sense.
It's all good. All right, so now we're going to cross our fingers, and we are going to go over to Andy Bottoms and hope that we can hear him and see him. Mr. Bottoms, your Bottoms line on tonight's IU victory.
All right, well, let's see how this goes. I need to write a sternly worded email to our friends at Google, apparently, but... No, I mean, just as you guys said, a really good game. I thought Ferrell obviously had a huge game for IU, so that's going to be exciting. But he really played fantastic, and it's easy to talk about other people, and it's certainly been easy for us this year to talk about other guys and kind of take him for granted. But I thought tonight was a night where I don't know how you could start talking about anything else, quite frankly. And you may have said that already, but I did not see it. But just a terrific all-around game. The assists were great. Just in general, I think his play really set the tone for what IU did offensively. 23 assists on, I think, 34 made baskets. No coincidence that you're having that many assists when you're shooting 65% from the field. And the only times the offense got a little stagnant was when they got away from that for a couple possessions in the second half when things were really cooking. Once they got started. So just a really good offensive performance against a solid defensive team, and really, as much as it was, I think we all feel like we're in this mode of when can you actually exhale and start to feel good about everything, perhaps even more so after the Michigan game. It never really got that close. I think it was like, if it gets under 10, what happens? But I mean, I'd be interested to go back and kind of see, even from a lineup perspective, how close Chattanooga got once IU really took control there toward the end of the first half, and never really left it out. And I think that's a good thing. And on the other side, certainly some things for this team to work on. So while the offense was a well-oiled machine, I think there's some things defensively that they need to work on to get corrected before they play whoever they're going to face on Saturday and go from there. So, kind of a good game in that regard from a coaching perspective, where you've got some talking points to go through, but also a lot of positives to pass around as well.
Absolutely. Well, folks, if something has felt a little bit off about the show on Monday and right now, it's because one of our teammates isn't here, Will DeWitt, who's still recovering from his shoulder surgery, and so we want to send our best to Will. He should be back for Saturday's show, but he did send us in his stat of the night. So this is from Will. Tonight's stat of the game has to do with the Hoosiers' impressive outing from the field. And I mentioned this in the beginning. Indiana hit an amazing percent of its shots and finished with an effective field goal percentage of 73.7. Which led to an offensive rating of 144.9 efficiency rating, which is unbelievable. Again, we can't verify those stats because the box scores are all wrong, but even stats that high, you believe it after watching Indiana play. And for reference, the Hoosiers' effective field goal percentage on the season was 58.6, which was in the top 5 in the country, and they blasted past that. And this was not a slouch of a defensive team. Chattanooga came in as a top 100 defensive team, and a lot of people were talking about how their pressure could cause problems for Indiana. Not so much, certainly in the second half. And then we'll also...
I'm sorry, I just want to add something on the shooting percentage thing that I think is important. A lot of times when Indiana has this kind of offensive performance, it's based on three-pointers. It's shooting the lights out and just whatever. They shot 58.8% from three and 10 of 17 tonight, but they were 37 of 57 overall, which means they had 27 field goals inside the three-point line. That's enormous for this Indiana team because it means they were working from inside out and getting easy buckets at the basket. So they were shooting. It wasn't just a lights-out shooting night. They were getting good shots and a lot of stuff at the rim. And I think that's a key if this team's going to move forward. In the tournament, you've got to get easy buckets because after 2 weeks playing really intense games against really good teams, your legs start to go. You get tired. Shots flatten out. You're not going to be able to three-point shoot your way to a championship. So just seeing how they were able to work inside, everybody, it wasn't just Thomas Bryant and Max Bielfeldt in the post. Everybody was getting involved in the paint, either going up and scoring or going up and getting fouled. And that's why you see such a high percentage, because they were taking really good shots. I think that's worth noting.
No, it is, and I'm glad you pointed that out. And Indiana had 23 assists, and we talked about Yogi's 10. 11 came from two guys, and we're going to talk about those two guys in a second because they are the other big storyline for this game. We'll get to them in a second. But to finish off Will's stat, he also mentions that in his tournament debut, OG Anunoby set a career high with 14 points. He was 6 of 7 from the field. He missed a shot just to see what it felt like there in the second half. He was phenomenal, and we will definitely spend some more time talking about OG because we may well have reached the point where he needs to play as many minutes as he has the stamina to handle, and we're going to talk about that. Real quick before we do, I do want to mention our sponsor, SeatGeek. Obviously now we know that Indiana is playing on Saturday, so if you want to head out to Des Moines for the Saturday game, if you really want to feel bold or just kind of plan ahead and look out for the East Regional next week and just see what tickets are in the event that Indiana wins on Saturday, go to SeatGeek.com. You can search for both of those events, and not only will you see the ticket prices and the deal rating for those events, but you can actually put your email address in and get an alert when ticket prices go down. So it's very, very handy. And the other great thing is that because you're an Assembly Call listener, you can get $20 off your first purchase or a $20 rebate on your first purchase. So here's what you do. Go to SeatGeek.com, click on the button in the top in the nav bar that says, "How did you hear about us?" Or download the free SeatGeek app and then use the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY. Then when you make that first ticket purchase, you will get a $20 rebate from SeatGeek. It's the best place to find the best value on tickets. And now it's March. Your Hoosiers are looking good. This would be the time to go check out some tickets, and SeatGeek is the place to do it. Go to SeatGeek.com. All right, everybody. Well, you are listening to another victorious, jubilant, excited, enthusiastic episode of the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And Andy, let's talk about the other major storyline from tonight, because I thought coming in, the biggest question to me was going to be, number one, once we saw that Colin Hartman started, how would he play? How would he respond? Because we saw him get hurt in that Michigan game and then struggle afterwards, especially offensively. And then with the return of Robert Johnson, how would he look? And those two guys so far surpassed my expectations for how they would play, I don't even know how to describe it. Hartman had 8 points, 5 assists, 4 boards, 3 steals, a block. The only thing he didn't do well was that 1 3-pointer, but everything else he did so well. And that doesn't even tell how well he played on defense, because on a night when a lot of guys were getting blown by, I thought he was very solid defensively. And then Robert Johnson with 7 points, 6 assists, he made all of his shots and looked as aggressive and decisive and smooth as we have seen him. And we talked about how important it would be for Indiana to have both those guys at least 90%. Man, they looked great tonight, and that's a huge development for Indiana.
Yeah, I think everybody was, especially, everybody reacted to seeing Hartman with the brace on his wrist in the picture before they left. And I know Alex tweeted out yesterday that he didn't shoot, and so obviously a lot of questions about what he could do. And I think that 3 was one he had to take, and clearly it was bothering him a bit on that shot. But to be able to contribute in the other ways that he did, made some nice shots around the rim with his left hand, and I thought really played well. Did a little bit of, it was a kind of a vintage Colin Hartman things type game where he did a little bit of everything and was where he needed to be. So I think the wrist is going to be something that continues to bother him, and whether teams get that on film and try to force him to make shots, then so be it. But he certainly played well and proved that he can still make a lot of contributions even if he's not able to shoot those 3-pointers as he did before. And Robert Johnson, somebody tweeted out that was covering the game. They said that when he kind of walks around or jogs around, he still looks like he's bothered, but when the game gets started, he seems to be fine. And that certainly was the case tonight. I think good for him to shake a little bit of the rust off and get some game action under his belt for the Kentucky game. We talked in the I guess potentially the Kentucky game. We talked on the preview show about how important he was going to be in that matchup as they start to think about defensive matchups and game planning and things like that. And so good to see that he could move pretty well tonight and shot the ball well and seemed to have some pep in his step and seemed to be pretty fresh. And for a guy who had been talked about a number of times during the season as just being really banged up, you wonder if a little bit of the extra rest, while it was necessary for the ankle, may not have helped other parts of his game as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Andy. Ryan, let's talk a little bit about OG because obviously, with the Victor-esque 360-degree dunk, another OG, that OG steal and dunk, and the OG steal and spin layup, and the other dunk that he had. I mean, it was a night of highlights for OG. But the thing about OG that I love is the highlights are what people are going to remember. But when you watch him play defense in the half court, he is outstanding. And I talked about this on the halftime show, how he plays so low and he takes such big steps. But they're smart steps that put him in the right position to beat his man to the spot. And then he's not out of control when he beats his man. He's there. He's got the low center of gravity. He's under control, and he's got those long arms, so then he can disrupt a shot even if a guy might get there a half second faster. And it's what makes him so much fun to watch in the half court. And you watch, when Indiana's playing its best half court defense and when it's containing dribblers the best, you've got OG in there because he contains dribblers and he can play good help side defense. I mean, this was a special night for him, and I think as I said earlier, we're reaching a point where, it's single elimination time. You need your best guys on the floor the most minutes. It's hard to justify leaving him off the floor.
Yeah, look, here's the thing about OG. Whatever Tom Crean is doing with OG Anunoby, keep doing. Maybe increase it a little, but whatever you're doing, it's working. And this guy has become the straw that stirs the drink for this team. He was 6 of 7 from the floor tonight, 2 of 2 from 3. He missed 2 free throws. Got to work on that kid. 14 points, 2 rebounds, and assists, 2 steals, and a 360-degree dunk. That's not actually listed in the stat sheet. It should be, because I think we're going to get more than one from him in a game at some point. He can break that record. But no, he's just a guy who is always in the right position. He's always doing the right thing. He's so efficient with his energy, and he's got it so focused where it needs to be. Defensively, he's always, as you said, in a great stance. He doesn't overplay, doesn't overhelp, rarely. And he's just so solid in every aspect of the game defensively. Skies for rebounds. He looks for somebody to block out, then goes and gets the ball. And he's just silly athletic on top of that with those long arms. He's just built to play defense. But what has been so surprising this year is how well his offensive game has rounded into form. In the last 3 games, I'm talking about this in the chat. In the last 3 games, he's 14 of 16 from the field, shooting 87.5%. I mean, but the thing is that that's not ridiculous because his shots he takes are all at the rim. I mean, he'll pull out and he hit 2 3-pointers tonight, but for the most part, he's taking smart shots. He's not jacking shots from the corner or driving in crowded areas and stuff like that. He's finding the right spots and going up, and if he doesn't have a shot, he's not forcing it. He's kicking it back out and rerunning the offense. You need a guy like that. Even when he's not as good as OG, you need people like that. And OG, we know, as a freshman, is already this good. Man, he's going to only get better. I love his role for this team. You're right. There are times where I'm sitting there thinking, maybe we should get him back in there, play a little more. But whatever they're doing as far as the bench rotations and things like that is working so well. And throw the Michigan game out, okay? We'll just assume that was an aberration. You look at that last stretch of games and what they were doing with the bench and rotating these guys in and how they were able to play defense and turn that into offense, you've got to like whatever they're doing. I agree, though. I would like to see OG play a few more minutes. But anybody who's talking about, hey, he should be starting, no. I want his energy off the bench. I like that role for him. I like him being able to come in and plug a hole where something's going wrong. You know, if one guy keeps getting beat, he can go in and he'll defend their player that's hot, or shift things offensively and cut to the glass. And one thing I noticed tonight, and we're relying on it a lot more, is OG and Juwan Morgan playing the post with Max Bielfeldt and Thomas Bryant sitting on the bench and getting rest. And hey, you get into foul trouble, you're going to need somebody to step up, and those guys already look confident doing that on offense.
Yeah, good point. And Brian in our chat mentions it's just OG has a defensive mentality and he thinks ahead, and his anticipation is so good. And as he says, his stance allows for that to happen. And because he's in such a good stance and he's always got his head on a swivel and is aware of what's going on, he's able to get those steals with that great anticipation. So that was the good about the defense. Andy, I want to talk a little bit about. There was so much good tonight, but it wasn't all perfect. And I think especially in the first half, Indiana's defense left a lot to be desired in terms of containing dribblers. And there were a few flashbacks, frankly, to earlier in the season and last season with, me getting ready with the "if you're just going to let them drive by you" tweet, because I thought, Indiana was a little lax on defense and not beating guys to spots and letting guys turn the corner on them. And I thought Yogi was an egregious offender of this, especially early. And I thought he got better in the second half. But and I thought overall Indiana got better in the second half. But also Chattanooga settled a little bit more. And I think as you look at what may lie ahead on Saturday, that's one area where, look, when Indiana scores like this, there are going to be a lot of teams, even if their defense isn't good. But to make a deep tourney run against better teams, the defense is going to have to get a little bit better, especially containing dribblers, no?
Yeah, I definitely agree. The game kind of got blown open in the second half when Chattanooga seemed to panic a little bit and just started hoisting three-pointers, and IU got a few runouts and made shots, and that really was when it got close to 20 for the first time, and really kind of felt like, there's not really a chance for them to come back. But certainly in the first half, and even a couple times early in the second, really just getting to the rim, running, ball screening actions and some lobs down low. So that's definitely something IU has to shore up a little bit. I think. Ryan and I exchanged a couple messages on Twitter. I think Bielfeldt did as well as anybody on ball screen defense, because there was a lot of guys that struggled in that regard. That was an issue in the Michigan game, and so I think that was that was a factor. And so I think that's something obviously with again we're assuming Kentucky wins. Maybe they won't, but with Ulis and Murray, you got to find ways to contain those guys. Even Isaiah Briscoe, who's not a guy that can really step out and make shots, he's going to attack the basket, and so they've got to figure out ways to cut off those driving lanes, and whether that's playing off a little bit and trying to make guys make shots, which I don't know is a great strategy against Murray, but I think that they have to get those things shored up, and tonight it almost felt like it became clear early on that they could score pretty much whenever they wanted to. Chattanooga, for as good as they've been defensively on the season, the press wasn't working early on. They went to 1-3-1 for a couple of possessions, and IU got baskets out of that, and just kind of felt like almost no matter what happened. And I think that's something that we saw this team get lulled into a little bit, where we can just outscore anybody. And there's a lot of games when you're shooting the ball like they were tonight. That's probably fair, but I think the dribble penetration and things like that were big factors. But there were also times that Anunoby in particular did a really nice job of helping on some of these ball screens, and so you saw some in-game improvement where guys would get into the lane and deny passes and then recover back out. So if you want to look at the glass half full approach, you did see a little bit of in-game improvement in that regard, but they're certainly going to see a lot of that from Purdue, or
Ryan.
Purdue, Kentucky. Sorry.
Yeah,
I mixed up the teams that I don't like.
Yeah, by the way,
Purdue is no longer in the tournament.
I was gonna say, I don't know if you noticed, but there's no chance we'll face Purdue down the road. Zero chance of that
I just
happening.
wanted to shoehorn that in there. I just wanted to shoehorn that in there somehow, so it all worked out for the best.
Hey, Ryan, you want to make a point about the defense?
Yeah, I think that it got a lot better in the second half, and sort of towards the end of the first half as well. The key for Indiana, and it has been all year, and I've been saying it, make teams shoot over you. Don't let them turn the corner. And if they beat you by shooting over you, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Make them turn into a jump shooting team and make them shoot over you. I don't care if it's the best jump shooter in the world. They're not going to make better than 50%. Most of them, three-point shooters aren't going to make better than 45% in the long run. If they do better than that, you're probably going to lose anyway. So make them a jump shooting team, be aggressive, and get rebounds and don't allow second chance points. And I think that what we saw in the second half was Chattanooga scored 37 in the first half, 37 in the second half. I think the second half, some of that was late. They kind of drained it late. And when you get, the lead stretched out, the other team's going to score some. I think if this were a more competitive game, that number would be lower. But I think that Indiana did improve in the second half and did, improve on the things that they weren't doing in that Michigan game, which was closing out to shooters, but also not letting them, get by you, make them shoot the basketball, and I think they did that tonight. And Chattanooga was 3 of 18 from 3, so that's what you have to force teams to do, especially in a long tournament like this. And you're right. I mean, Andy's right. You know, forcing Murray of Kentucky to shoot threes may not be the best plan, but again, it's better than a guy having an uncontested layup and potentially putting your big man in foul trouble or anything like that. So I thought they improved. Again, still every game could always be better, and they still need to keep improving on it and still need to keep that as a point of emphasis and focus. But I thought it was much better in the second.
Let's talk about the work that Tom Crean did tonight, because I think, look, Tom Crean was certainly the clear choice for Big Ten Coach of the Year. He won it, but after the way Indiana played against Michigan, and even some of the odd substitution things that we saw in that game, I think a lot of people felt a little bit uneasy that, okay, you know, great regular season, but is this team about to underachieve again in the tournament? You know, Tom Crean and his team haven't always been at their best in the tournament. That's just a fact of the past 5 years. And I thought tonight he clearly had his team ready to go. I mean, again, like I said, the energy was great from the tip. The execution and focus just took a little while to catch up. But, boy, when they did, this team looked dynamite. But I thought he made some really good decisions. And I want to take you back to one in the first half that I thought was really important. And that's when Thomas Bryant got his second foul with 17 minutes to go. And poor Thomas, the guy still can't catch a break. He has more fouls called on him that are phantom fouls than anybody. And I really wish it would stop, but whatever. So Thomas has to go out at the 17-minute mark. And again, you know, after that it was pretty up and down. Indiana got the lead, but you know, Chattanooga kept getting it down to 3 or getting it down to 5, 4. And so Tom Crean decided to roll the dice. There were about 4 or 5 minutes, actually about 6 minutes left in the first half, I think, and he puts Thomas in with 2 fouls. And a lot of people don't like this because they think when you have 2 fouls, you should sit for the rest of the half. But he rolled the dice. He didn't want his big man just sitting over there for 17 game minutes, getting out of the flow of the game. And when he put Thomas in, Thomas contributed. He did so without picking up the second foul, and that was a point where Indiana extended the lead. And then when Thomas went back out to kind of save him for the final 2 minutes, Indiana went on that spurt that put him up 12. And I like the decision, not just because the ends justified it. It worked this time. But even if Thomas had gotten the third foul, I love the fact that Tom isn't coaching from a position of insecurity here, and he's trusting his guy to go out there and play, knowing he doesn't want him to, you know, to lose the rhythm of the game. And I like that boldness. And I don't think that kind of coaching boldness is something that we often see from Tom Crean, especially in the tournament. And just like we saw him adjust in the regular season down the stretch in the Big Ten, maybe that's the kind of adjustment we'll see. That and others are some kind of adjustments we'll see in tournament play. But I think it's a little thing that, to me, suggests the mentality that I want to see in my coach, and I thought it was a great move.
Yeah, the key, and you said it in there, is he trusted his player to be smart, not pick up a foul. Now, if he does pick up a foul and picks up his third, it's not the end of the world because you've got Max Bielfeldt, who's been such a good contributor this year. You've got Juwan Morgan and OG Anunoby, who can kind of combine to play that in the post. So it's a move by Crean that is, again, rolling the dice. It is. And we've seen him do that a few times this year with Thomas Bryant, with 2 fouls, to bring him in late, get him some run, get him out there so he doesn't sit on the bench and get cold for 17 minutes, as you said, then 20 minutes of halftime. He got in there. He was in the mix. He played well. He was focused. And a couple times guys went right at him, and he didn't let them go, but he really made it clear that he wasn't going to foul. And I think that was smart. And again, the coach having faith in his player is a big deal. That gets players to buy in. When you realize that your coach is going to trust you with something like that, something as important as that, it gets you to buy in and feel like you belong. And feel like he's got your back. And I really like that risk by Tom Crean. I liked it at the time. A lot of people did not. But I liked that risk at the time, and we've seen Thomas handle it before this year. And sure, maybe at some point that's going to bite us, but I really think that Crean trusts his guys and trusts them to play smart. And if you get a crazy foul, that's not your fault. That's, you know, the flow of the game or maybe, you know, a bad call or whatever. But he trusts him to be smart with it and not, not give a foul away for easy reasons. And look at Bryant. Bryant had 13 points, only 2 rebounds, but that's because Troy Williams was grabbing all of his rebounds. So I thought Bryant had a nice game, and I thought that it was really key that Crean trusted him.
Andy, do you want to jump in on Bryant?
Yeah, a couple things I noticed about him. I thought it was definitely a role that particularly at the time that it happened, because IU had been allowing so much dribble penetration, so it kind of felt like, uh, a potential situation where he could get set up to struggle. But I did think he did a good job. I think, a couple things stood out to me. One good and one bad. The bad one first was, when he really struggled tonight defensively, it was because he was giving up post position too easily, and so the guys on the catch is already too far inside, and he really couldn't use any of his strength or length at that point to prevent shots. So I think that's something for him to watch. Kentucky's not a team that dumps the ball inside a great deal. So again, if that ends up being the matchup, but certainly if they would face Stony Brook against Jameel Warney, that's going to be problematic for them. So I thought that was where he struggled defensively. The one thing I thought he did a really good job of was keeping his emotions in check, and we've talked about that so many times with him in these foul calls and things like that. And so even when the clown show that is Pat Adams came out and called a couple terrible fouls, he didn't really seem to get rattled by that. So I was happy that he was able to really keep his composure and those kinds of things. So I think it's a good good show of maturity on his part, and even in the face of some things not going his way, I thought he held his emotions in check really well, probably as well as we've seen him do all season. So a good sign, I'd say.
Ryan, Andy's stealing your role. He's ranting about Google, ranting about the clown show.
Hey,
that is
man,
Pat
you know
Adams.
what? You know what? I'm trying not to get typecast here. Didn't mention the officials once. Just passing it on. Passing it on.
You didn't. Let's talk real quick about Troy Williams, who I think, Ryan, you mentioned it was kind of a mixed bag for him, which I agree with. And again, I talked about how he and Yogi were trying to do too much in the first half, and I thought at times in the second half, Troy was trying to do too much. I think if you look at the box score line, 12 points, 8 boards, he had a steal. That looks good. But the 4 turnovers were not good, especially some of the times when the turnovers happened, because it was like the offense was in a good flow and Troy would just take it and just put his head down and dribble. And there were a couple times I noticed on Twitter, both Inside the Hall and Justin Albers tweeted that Crean was irate with Troy. On one, he was even screaming to hand off, and Troy just took it and ended up turning it over. So, a mixed bag for Troy. I like that he seems to have refound his nose for rebounding. Because that's huge for this team. And I thought he lost it at certain times this season, but down the stretch, I thought he really found that back. He's really attacking the glass. But look, again, it was kind of the one black mark on offense, is that I thought Troy reverted into some old habits that we haven't really seen very much since the Michigan State game when he's been so good. And that comes out obviously in the 4 turnovers. But, again, he contributed, but I think as we move forward in the tournament, that kind of decision-making from Troy can get Indiana into a little bit of trouble, and he needs to be better. He's been better. Andy, any thoughts that you have on Troy before we move on?
Well, I think that's the one thing. Again, we're doing a lot of looking forward, and I think that's reasonable to do at this point. Certainly more so than early in the week when we looked ahead as well. But I think it's one of those things where you don't want Troy to get into this game against Kentucky and really feel like he has to do a lot or do more than he's comfortable with and more than he should be doing, and really try to do something that is more isolation based and not doing things off the ball. So it was somewhat concerning, although his effort was really good. And so I think when you kind of look at the different things that that he did, he certainly brought a lot of effort, did a really good job rebounding, and was making a lot of hustle plays. Just was when things bogged down. I mean, the difference of how good the team looked offensively tonight when the ball was moving versus when guys are just pounding it into the ground, as they fell into a pattern of doing a couple times, was just night and day. And so I think that's something he just has to continue to work on. Hopefully got it out of his system, and will be able to bounce back against whoever the opponent is on Saturday. But I thought he played a lot better in the second half, but certainly had a couple of those moments, and certainly thinks he's going to have to keep to an absolute minimum regardless of the opponent on Saturday.
Yeah, look, Troy had a bit of a Troy game, which is not necessarily derogatory. I'm just saying he had a bit of a Troy game. You can take that how you want. Some people think Troy game, wonderful. Some others think Troy game.
It's like saying you had a Ryan show. Like, we get it.
Yeah, hey, wow, Troy's amazing then, huh? So since the Michigan State game where he didn't score and only had 4 rebounds, he has had, in order, 18 points, 5 rebounds, 19 points, 1 rebound, 7 points, 5 rebounds, 15 points, 7 rebounds, 23 and 5, 16 and 4, and today had 12 and 8. I'll take that from Troy Williams. I know it was a mixed bag. There were some bad turnovers, but I felt like when he saw the offense got going, he sort of just let it happen in the second half especially. He didn't get in the way. He just sort of like, oh, these guys are playing well here. Let's move the ball. Let's do what we need to do. And I thought defensively he looked okay. He got beaten badly on one pump fake, but other than that, I thought he was pretty solid. Used his length to keep guys from shooting over him. But again, 12 points, 8 rebounds in a foreign arena in the first game of a tournament like this. I'm okay with that. I think that he, like everybody, needs to settle down a little bit. We know Troy gets overhyped a lot, and we love that energy, but at the same time, he needs to be centered. He'll look at the tape from this, realize what he did wrong, and realize, where he needs to change things up. But 12-8 out of Troy, I know 4 turnovers, not good, but 12-8 from Troy, I'll take any day of the week. That's a great game, and I thought, as I've harped on a few times, I thought the defensive rebounds from Troy were outstanding tonight. Eliminated second chance points. He had good blockouts, and then he went up and got that basketball. Didn't wait for it to come down. He got it at the rim, and I think that was really important for this game, to not let Chattanooga miss bad shots and then get putbacks or anything like that. So I'm okay with this game for Troy, and hopefully he improves on it moving forward.
Well, and frankly, if you're complaining about Troy's effort tonight, that kind of puts into context how well Indiana played, because there's just not that many nits to pick with tonight, and so I think that shows. So real quick, I do want to let people know, because a few people have asked, what are the best ways that you can support the show? We always appreciate it when you do. You can actually go to assemblycall.com/support, and we've got a couple of options there, whether you want to donate, whether you want to buy Indiana merchandise that will actually help, because we get a small commission from it. There are links there at assemblycall.com/support. And either one, we have people who send us a monthly recurring donation. Some people send one-time donations. Some people go on a shopping spree at the IU store and buy stuff for all their friends and family, and we get a cut of that. Anyway, we just appreciate it. We love the fact that you watch the show, that you listen to the show, that you share in this IU journey with us, which is so special and so fun and so cathartic in so many ways. And if you want to take that to the next step and help us with, paying for the chat and paying for some of the hard costs that we have with the show, paying for Ryan's exorbitant salary, then we greatly, greatly appreciate any of your help. And you can do that at assemblycall.com/support. We thank you. All right, everybody. Well, we are rolling here on the Assembly Call IU postgame show. A very happy and jubilant episode as the Hoosiers win 99-71 tonight over Chattanooga. All right, here is my big question I want both of you to answer. Obviously, the idea of facing Kentucky is just so delicious, not just for us, but for the nation. It would be such a great game. Andy, would you rather play Kentucky, or would you rather play Stony Brook and laugh at Kentucky? Which one? Because we don't know what. Just so those of you listening on the podcast, there's about how much time is left? There's 14 minutes left in the first half, and it's 6-4 Kentucky right now as we're recording this. So,
I don't know. It's one of those things that's funny where I think everybody would like to see them play Kentucky, but if you told me that there was the potential at an easier game, I guess I don't know why you would turn that down. So I guess that's probably I'd fall on that side of things. I mean, early on, Stony Brook's really attacking them on the glass. They can't make a shot to save their life at this point, but they've managed to tie it up despite shooting really poorly. But they're making a lot of effort plays and really exploiting Kentucky's weakness inside. So that'll definitely be something to watch for as we start to preview this in a little bit.
Ryan, what do you think?
Stony Brook, no questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care about tradition or anything. I want the best path. I was rooting so hard for Florida Gulf Coast tonight. Okay, I'm that guy. So, and I will be rooting very hard for Providence or USC or whoever. I want my team to have the best chance to move on. Kentucky is a very talented team. I think Indiana can beat Kentucky. I absolutely do. But I really think that Indiana can beat Stony Brook. So you always want your team to have the best path. Sure, I would love to beat Kentucky, but even being able to laugh at Kentucky would fulfill that need for me. Just like last year when I was at the Final Four and Wisconsin beat them, that was one of the happiest moments of my life, was watching them not get an undefeated season in person. So one thing I think is interesting about that matchup, though, there's only one player from either roster who was there the last time Indiana and Kentucky played, and that's Alex Poitras and Yogi Ferrell, the only two players.
They weren't there. They weren't there. Last time we played was 2012.
Oh wait, no, they weren't.
No,
were they?
yeah, no one.
That's
from
right.
The current roster.
Nobody was there. I thought Yogi was there. I forgot. Yeah, no, it was Verdell Jones was the point guard.
Yeah.
Was the running point. Yeah. So again, okay, fine. So nobody was there when John Calipari ruined that rivalry. So yeah, pretty amazing that these teams have gone so long without playing, and it's an unbelievable. It will be an unbelievable matchup. I think obviously that will be the marquee game of the second round if it happened. According to everybody, that's not just a bias of mine. I think that everybody would point to that as the marquee game of the second round.
Yeah, the NCAA tournament is not the time to get sentimental or to get emotional, anything like that. You want the best path moving forward. No one thinks back to 2002 and thinks about how that Indiana team really they had the great win over Duke, but they were helped out getting to the Final Four by that bracket being blown wide open. And getting to face, I think, a 13 seed in the second round, and then Kent State a 10 seed in the Elite Eight. Totally fine. I'm totally fine with that. It's the NCAA tournament. You just move on and go as far as you possibly can.
The overlooked aspect of the tournament is that to win it, you've got to get incredibly lucky. You've got to have so many things go well. It's not just about being good, and it's not just about playing well. You got to get luck, too. And it's not necessarily just your draw. It's just the way things unfold in a game, all that stuff, staying healthy. You got to have luck. And so you really got to hope for some luck on your side.
Yeah, also, when you're a Big Ten team and you have about an 8 to 10 point lead late and you have a guy like A.J. Hammonds, you probably don't need luck then. You should probably just get him the ball. Just saying. Just a little. To our friends in West Lafayette who are having a rough night.
Yeah, let's go ahead and stomp on
I hope none of them are listening to this right now, though. That would be really sad.
I hope they've never listened, Jared. I really do. It's the one place I'm willing to discount listeners.
Okay, so it's 10-8 Kentucky right now. Andy, let's look a little bit more in depth at the Kentucky game. And I do want to say this. Listening to Crimson Cast, I thought Galen and Scott had a really nice episode a couple of days ago, and they pointed out something about Kentucky that everybody's going crazy about Kentucky, the SEC champs, and they're really hot, and they are, and they beat a really good Texas A&M team to win the SEC tournament title. But they haven't really played a lot of good teams recently, and they haven't beaten a lot of good teams outside of that win over Texas A&M. Certainly not the caliber of Indiana outside of that game, and so as good as they're playing, I just want to make sure everybody doesn't think this is like the 2012 Cats that are going to be rolling out here. They're really good, but they have flaws just like every other team, and it's not like they've gone on some murderer's row of victories. So I just want to preface it by saying that. But give us, kind of the quick little scouting report, Andy, of where Indiana might have advantages in that game and where they're really going to have to watch out because Kentucky has the advantage.
Yeah, I think if you want to look at, the biggest challenge is going to be the guards and Ulis and Murray and how you contain those guys, particularly as we think about defensively. We talked, earlier in the week about Robert Johnson being really key to that, and who does Yogi guard and how do you do that? I think you're certain to see OG on one, if not both of those guys. It feels to me like this might be a chance to pull out a little bit of what Crean did with, I think it was Watford against Trey Burke, where he put him on him. Could you see OG against Ulis and really just try to tower over him and disrupt what they're doing offensively and let Yogi guard Murray? I wouldn't be shocked to see that. I don't know whether we will, but I think that's something that will be interesting to watch, just how they defend those guys. It's going to be a case of really throwing the kitchen sink at them and seeing what works well and what doesn't. They're going to see a lot of those guys. So those are the matchups to me that are important. How does IU survive during stretches of the game when Yogi's not in there? There's certainly going to be those. The timeouts are a little bit longer in the tournament, but so I think that'll be interesting to watch there from a defensive standpoint. I think if you want to look at an area where there might be an advantage, it's certainly inside. Kentucky seems to be getting, I have no idea what the numbers are in this now, but they're getting mauled on the boards just by kind of gut feel and watching the game. A lot of it just hustle plays and things like that, and where they've really struggled this year is getting consistent play inside. Their foul rate for some of their big guys is pretty high. Marcus Lee's already out of this game with 2 fouls, and Scal has been really up and down, has shown some more confidence on the offensive end, but Jamil Warney's rejected him at the rim a couple times already in this one. So I think those are the areas where, if you want to look, I use performance on the offensive glass for decent chunks of this year, I think becomes really important. Although if they shoot like they did tonight, that becomes less important. So I think that's something to, performance on the boards is definitely going to be a big one, not letting them get shots at the rim and not letting those big guys get some garbage baskets and things like that. But we talk all the time about IU needing to pound it inside. I think this is definitely a game where you got to get Thomas Bryant the ball inside. And there's a lot of different ways to get it in there. Robert Johnson made some really nice drives and dishes today. Getting there, OG had one or two as well like that. So it isn't necessarily post touches, which I think are important, but also just other ways to attack them inside because they're not as good defensively. They're still pretty good. I think they're ranked not too far off of what IU is from a Pomeroy standpoint, but they aren't quite the defensive juggernaut that they've been in other years, but they are really electric defensively. So, containing the guards, ball screen defense, as we talked about earlier in the show, I think is going to be the big keys. But if there's a place that IU can take advantage, to me, that's second chance points and beating them inside of it.
Andy, to put some numbers to your gut feeling, Stony Brook is rebounding 40% of its misses on offense and 100% of its misses on defense. And how bad the offensive start is, both Stony Brook and Kentucky's offensive efficiency number, it's lower than Indiana's field goal percentage. So that gives you shows you how high Indiana's field goal percentage was as well. Andy, that's a great reference with Watford and Trey Burke. And Tom Crean has proven that he's not afraid to do things like that. I'll tell you, Ryan, I had this thought during the game. We know how I feel like Yogi is a better defender denying guys the ball than playing on-ball defense and containing dribblers. I was kind of thinking maybe you put Yogi on Jamal Murray and deny him the ball, and then put a guy like OG onto Ulis and disrupt him. What do you think of something like that?
I mean, it could work. There's so many different matchups that Indiana could go with here. It's gonna be interesting to see what the game plan is. Honestly. I also do want to see Yogi and Ulis go head to head because it'll be the one time this year Yogi is taller than his opponent. So I think that could work. I think one thing you're going to see a lot of switching. So I think everybody's going to be on both guys at some point. And that's you've seen that with IU the last couple of weeks. So I don't think that will be different. Because it's Kentucky. But I do think that you will definitely see OG Anunoby on Murray and Ulis at different times just to give him a different look because, again, that guy's got a 7'3" wingspan that's, impossible to get over. And so I think that'll be a matchup they'll have to exploit. But, yeah, Kentucky very guard-heavy, as Andy said, and a team that just doesn't hustle to the glass as often as they should. So there are areas Indiana can exploit. This is not, as you said, that 2012 team that was just unbeatable. And if you'll remember that Sweet 16 matchup with Indiana played about as well as it could possibly play in that game, and Kentucky essentially played a perfect basketball game, and Indiana lost despite scoring I don't know how many points.
I think it was 102-90 was the final score.
Yeah, I mean, it was that was just a team that was in that stretch unbeatable. This is not that team. So I think that Indiana really has a shot, and hopefully we don't ever have to find out though, and they lose to Stony Brook.
Great quote from Colin Hartman about OG Anunoby. It's crazy. He has explosiveness unknown to man. Tell you what, sure looked like he did today.
It's known now, Colin.
That's right. Real quick statistical note that I wanted to point out. I mentioned this on Podcast on the Brink earlier, but we know that Yogi is the career leader for assists. But he actually entered tonight's game only 20 assists behind Isaiah Thomas's single-season school record that he set in 1981. I think Isaiah's was 197, and Yogi entered tonight with 177 assists, and he was averaging 5.5 a game coming in. And so I said during that intro, if we can play about 4 games, he might be able to get that. Well, he already split that in half tonight. So Yogi now just needs 10 assists, I believe. I haven't double-checked that. It's either 10 or 11 to tie or break Isaiah's school record for assists in a single season, which is outstanding. And that season, Isaiah averaged 5.7, so Yogi could obviously get up there and improve his average as well. Just another superlative to add to Yogi's superlative career, which if he can keep stacking up performances like this and the Hoosiers can keep winning, we often hear Dan Dockich talk about the big boy table, and I appreciate all of Dan Dockich's knowledge and perspective about Indiana basketball, and he is probably a better authority on the big boy table than me. But I kind of think Calbert Chaney's at the big boy table, even though he doesn't have a championship and some other guys. So I'm not saying Yogi has to win a championship to get there, but he certainly gets closer and closer to taking a seat at that table the further Indiana goes in the tournament and the more he plays this well.
All due respect to big fan of the show, Dan Dockich, but Sorry, I have to do it every show, guys.
You have nicknames for everybody.
Big fan of the show, Dan Dockich. I have to disagree with his assessment. Yogi's at the big boy table already. He's done it, and I think, as you said, Calbert Cheaney's there as well. I mean, there are a few guys who are the exception to the rule as far as that goes, and I agree with the rule generally. But when you've done the things that certain guys have done, and you racked up the marks that certain guys have racked up, you get a seat at the big boy table, and Yogi and Calbert are definitely two guys who were there.
By the way, I think I've been getting the score wrong. It was 99-74 Indiana tonight, not 99-71. So I think we should probably end the show here pretty soon so that we can all go watch this Kentucky Stony Brook game and do a little bit of scouting. The shows for the tournament tend to be a little bit less. But, Ryan, I do want to point something out here. There was a great moment during the game where they went over to Yogi's mom, really big fan of the show, Doc Libby, and her two daughters, and they showed the shirts that they were wearing, which were hilarious. The one shirt said, "Who is Yogi?" and then the other shirt said, "Yogi isn't famous, he's my annoying brother." And I couldn't help but thinking with, all of the attention and fame that our beloved Andy Bottoms has been getting for being the #1 bracketologist and the reigning #1 bracketologist, because the new numbers are out and Andy is #1, that we might have to get T-shirts, Ryan, for the next meetup. Who is Andy Bottoms? And then Andy Bottoms isn't famous. He's our annoying co-host. Just to make sure we keep his ego in check.
I am 100% behind this plan. I'm shocked that you came up with it and not me, because I'm the guy who usually comes up with stuff like that. But no, absolutely, 100%. We will have those shirts at the next meetup. But I do want to congratulate Andy once again for being the best bracketologist in the country. It's science, and Bracket Matrix has him #1. Can't disagree with that. So congratulations, Andy.
Yeah.
Thanks, I think.
Hey, you know what? This was a great year of bracketology for the family, because we certainly consider Brian Tonsony part of the Assembly Call family, and we let you guys know on the last episode that the Delphi Bracketology Club, they finished #1 for this season, which is phenomenal. So, just big congratulations all around to everybody, because you guys put in a lot of hard work for that, and it's very great to see. So real quick, I will let you all know that you should get on our email list, because we send our best content out via email. We'll have a post-game email in your inbox tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. Central Time, like we always do, breaking down this game, offering you insight that you don't get anywhere else, as well as enthusiasm and optimism that you don't get anywhere else. And you know what? Sometimes it's just nice to have little shots of juice about your team as you go throughout the season. We try and do that, always point out the silver lining. Clearly that's easy to do after a game like today. That's why you want to get on that email list. So go to assemblycall.com/subscribe or text Indiana, INDIANA, to 44144. You'll get a response back. Just put in your email address, and you will be on the list, and that way you will get all of that great content. All right, everybody. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. We are getting ready to wrap up here so that we can go watch the end of this Stony Brook, Kentucky game, because from what I see, there's palpable buzz building in Des Moines. It looks like Kentucky's up 16-10. So the game may not be easy on the eyes, but we will certainly watch and do some scouting to see who IU's opponent is on Saturday. But with that said, let's go to last call, fellas. Get some final thoughts on tonight's game before we wrap up. And Mr. Bottoms, we will go to you first.
Well, as someone who has been watching the game while we've been doing the show, it is most definitely not easy on the ice. Stony Brook is pretty lucky to not be done worse. I don't really remember the last time they made a shot, and they have taken some horrific ones in the process, but we'll see how it plays out. Hopefully the rims are not dented from the performance that they've had, because for as good as IU looked on offense, I'd say both of the teams in this one have looked just as bad. But just a good performance from IU. We've talked all year about how they bounced back, haven't had a losing streak, and that certainly kept true tonight with a good bounce back performance. I thought they played really well offensively, and I think regardless of the opponent, that should give them plenty of confidence, particularly as you go into a different place, shooting someplace you haven't been before and all those kinds of things. Sometimes that can be tricky, and I think IU's going to come into the game on Saturday against whoever they play with a lot of confidence on that end of the floor, which is certainly important as they get started. So I thought, like we said, great performances there all around. A lot of guys did well. The bench was terrific. I threw some stats in the chat. I think they had 37 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 turnovers. and 3 steals, I want to say. Missed 2, maybe 3 shots in total. So those guys played really well. And again, regardless of the opponent, that's going to be something that is going to need to go well. And when we look at games when IU's played well and done well against better opponents, we've been able to easily point to a bench guy or 2 or 4 who have really come up big. And I think that's something to look for on Saturday. But I think positive performance in a game that some people saw IU losing, and on a day when some other top-seeded teams struggled a whole heck of a lot more than IU did. So, it should be a good confidence boost for the guys. Everybody looks healthy. Everybody came out of this game just as healthy as they were coming in, which is something we haven't been able to say for a few games. So, just looking forward to whoever the opponent is on Saturday night with the trip to the Sweet 16 on the line.
Man, isn't it great to have a great performance in the NCAA tournament where you kind of like exceeded expectations? It feels like it's been a while since we've had one of those. Nights like tonight are just fun. Ryan, last call.
Well, I'd just like to remind Indiana fans that that Cal College up the road, as my buddy calls them, completely collapsed and lost their opening round game as a 5 seed to Arkansas Little Rock. And Indiana took care of business in the exact opposite way. When Indiana got challenged and punched in the face by a smaller school, Indiana stepped up and played the way a 5 seed is supposed to, played the way Big Ten champions are supposed to. And so while other people in the state are headed home, Indiana now has a chance to march on and face potentially our real biggest rival in the second round. So I think that appreciate what they did tonight. Obviously, we're focused now on Saturday, 100%. Enjoy it a little bit tonight, but as everybody is focused now on Saturday, regardless of who they play, this team has the ability. I mean, this team goes 9 deep and has the ability to use all those guys effectively. The 9 guys who played significant minutes tonight, no one had fewer than 6 points, and that was Juwan Morgan, who has a bad shoulder. These guys know how to play. They know how to play together. And tonight they really showed again that, when things are rough, they don't crumble, they step up. And that's a key to teams in March. When things go badly, do you get together or do you crumble? And this team all season, when things have gone badly, has stepped up. And also, I would like to point out that this team will not have a losing streak this season because they won tonight after losing that Michigan game. So this team bounces back from bad performances. These players bounce back from bad performances. They see what they did poorly, and bounce back. And I think that that's going to happen for some of the guys who may have had a little bit of an off night tonight. You're going to see them bounce back in the next one, regardless of who the opponent is.
Boy, they sure did. And that's why someone tweeted me before the game and said they were feeling more nervous than they thought they would. How was I feeling? And I said, my gut feeling is Indiana's going to play really well. And I firmly believed it. There's some games where it feels a little bit more questionable, but I just thought Indiana was really going to come out and play well tonight. And even when it was a little up and down early and it was 29-26 Indiana and, the offense is a little up and down, the defense isn't great, I kept feeling good because Indiana, they seem to be playing with that edge that they didn't have against Michigan, but that they had in pretty much every game after the Michigan State game. And it was so good to see that back. And I don't know if that was just a function of bouncing back after a loss, motivation by the NCAA tournament, feeling a little bit slighted by the seed, or just a really good team getting a guy like Robert Johnson back, feeling like they've got all their parts and pieces, and just playing great together. Probably a combination of all of it. But that team that we saw tonight, that's the team that we saw go 15-3 in the Big Ten, especially there toward the end. And that's a team that we all believe can make a big run this March. And it keeps you believing. That's why when it was 36-30 and I tweeted, I feel a spurt coming. And actually, I should have said spurt coming because I just said I feel a spurt, and Ryan was quick to point out that my phrasing was a little bit off there, which I get. That was fair. It's a fair comment. But what a spurt after that, because after it was 36-30, the Hoosiers just went off. And I'll tell you what the quote of the night was. And by the way, hat tip to Bill Raftery, because a lot of these March games, you can get announcers that I'm pretty sure have not watched your team play all season long. But we get Bill Raftery, who's done plenty of IU games for CBS this year, and he knows Indiana, he gets Indiana, and everything he was saying about the Hoosiers was spot on. So it's very nice during a March Madness game to have an announcer that knows your team, because it's a big frustration for folks like us and people like you who really know the team inside and out to not have an announcer that gives you anything. Raftery does. And after OG had his second big dunk of the night, the one where he kind of drove the baseline and had the reverse dunk, Raftery said the nation is on alert. And he was talking specifically about OG because it was obviously OG's, kind of his big national coming out party to do that in March, his first NCAA tournament game play so well. But he may as well have been talking about Indiana generally because, again, on a night when 2 other 5 seeds lost to 12 seeds, Indiana asserted its dominance. And while some people thought Chattanooga was overseeded, this is also a team that has gone and beaten big conference schools away from home this year. So they're certainly capable of playing teams well. Indiana did not give them a chance there in the second half. It started with that dagger three-pointer by Yogi to remind Chattanooga who was boss, and then it just carried out the whole second half. And indeed, the nation is on alert because this is going to end up being one of the more impressive performances from the first round. It's going to give Indiana a lot of confidence, and I feel good no matter who we play on Saturday, Stony Brook or Kentucky, bring them on because I really believe in this team. I think this team is ready to make a run. And remember this stat, if Indiana can win its next game and if they end up playing North Carolina, because I know a lot of people are worried, and I had this conversation with my dad who said he couldn't fathom picking Indiana to beat North Carolina. Just remember, Indiana's played North Carolina twice in the NCAA tournament. Both times they were underdogs, once for a national championship, and Indiana's beaten them both times. So just remember that. Tuck that in the back of your pocket. And I say that because have confidence in this team. Believe what we saw tonight is the type of team that can make a deep run in March. And all I know is I want to keep seeing Yogi play. So I'm hoping we still have 5 more games with Yogi, and if the Hoosiers play like this, that is not such a crazy thing to think. And that is the most exciting thing from tonight and really the true banner moment because we've gone away from these NCAA tournament games too often feeling like we didn't put our best foot forward. And I don't know that we put our best foot forward tonight because there are still some improvements that could be made, like Ryan said, but we put one hell of a good foot forward, and it makes me feel good about what this team can do over the next 2 weeks. Thank you for joining us live on this episode of the Assembly Call or listening on the podcast. We always appreciate you. Whenever the game is on Saturday, we will be here right afterwards with another episode of the Assembly Call. We can't wait. Enjoy watching basketball wall to wall. Until then, that's certainly what we'll be doing. And we will talk to you after IU versus ? Time to go watch the end of that Kentucky Stony Brook game and see who it is. Have a good night, everybody.